Oh, then, we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services. We find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end as per Yirmiyahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we read then Yirmiyahu the prophet, we find then these layers extremely true. And then 61st chapter of Yirmiyahu gives us then understandings of layers from Leviticus the 23rd chapter. So it was then mentioned in the last video regarding then explaining what's going on in the world. Very simply, Great Britain is going through some time of turmoil as far as the economy, and they are able to get their acts together, and then they are coming up with more plans of expansion of their economy. Let's then understand what's going on in the world, because Great Britain was then the first 800 years of the time without the holy cities. They were able to lead the world, and they must receive also few understandings as far as where the world is heading towards, so then they can make proper decisions. What's then going on as far as we can understand from the most important and prominent newspapers from around the world? We find then situations related precisely with Daniel the 11th chapter. In any form, in any case, in any level, we can trace back these situations precisely at Daniel the 11th chapter. How do we read this chapter then? How do we understand the movements of these events? What do we understand as far as nations, what they are going to do, how the economy is going then to behave? But then there is a situation going on with the holy instructions. As we read from the 11th chapter, obviously, then is recorded in Aramaic. It's not in Hebrew, but Aramaic. It was easier then for the Hebraic people then to write using then Aramaic than the ancient Hebrew. It's much easier understanding this way and then writing. However, as we then explained before, during the time of Daniel was then given understandings as far as the layers, or then the understandings related with the Gentiles mostly, then tabernacling. Tabernacling was then destroyed at the time. The temple was gone. The nation was in exile. They were there for 70 years. And then, because of these, Daniel at some point did understand that the time of exile then was ending, and it was a time then for the nation, the Hebraic people, to return to the Holy Land and then rebuild the temple. But let's then understand the Eastern culture, and then also let's group these understandings in a way that we can make sense on a Gentile's viewpoint rather than on a Hebraic understanding. Make it easier, so then the shift later can become much easier. When we read these situations, when we write these situations, the primary motion forward of the Daniel the 11th chapter relates with Gentile thinking, not Hebraic thinking. Gentile thinking, because these layers are related primarily on behalf of the Gentiles. What do we understand as far as for instance, verse number 8? What do we understand of Egypt? Why is Egypt then mixed in the situation? What does it say, Ezekiel the 37th chapter? Why should we then understand whatsoever is not related with tabernacling with a Gentile mindset? Why should we do this? Because, quite truly, these layers related with Gentiles mostly should be related with the sons of Ishmael. And there are sections of the Quran related with trade. Because of the skirmishes of the first son and the second son for so many centuries, then each of them forgot why they were there for. So then you have the first son, Ishmael, was the relationship of Ibrahim with Hagar. You have the Arab nations. Those are then the sons of Ishmael. Those are the traders, those people who did trade. The first time they inserted the name of the Creator himself in the midst of trade. The second son came later, was tabernacling. And tabernacling, the objective is directing the nations, giving it specific layers related with events and synchronisms amongst other nations also. Reading the 11th chapter of Daniel truly mostly relates with Gentile leadership. Should these then documents be interpreted by tabernacling? Does it make sense? No. Give you an example. Certain sections of the 11th chapter of Daniel does relate with the kingdom of the north. Some of the words are related with northbound. You can make these confused because then changes the meaning. However, the Hebrew word is the same. From the original manuscripts of Daniel, they were not. When we read Hebrew, for instance, and understand Egypt, has nothing to do with the spoils brought by those roughly 600,000 Hebrews came out of Egypt during the time of Exodus. So then, when we read the Gentile level, should not have any mixing with tabernacling understanding. 62nd chapter of Yeshayahu, for instance, explains of the sons of Ishmael. Turbans are used by desert people. Hebrews, they use veil. So there are some portions of the Holy Instructions, because of a lack of understanding of times and the seasons, and because at some point the Hebraic people did reject the first son. Then when they were translating understandings related with the Gentiles, they had a tendency of bringing these situations with the culture of Hebraic people, and sometimes they did not match. Because of these, then we have to kind of take away these instructions and do a cleaning of them and clean them up. There are sections that does not relate with tabernacling, or there are sections that are solely related with Gentile understanding. What's going on in the world? We understand then there is a set of skirmishes of the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom. At this very point in time, for instance, in Brazil, there is obviously the election coming up on the 26th, and there are great chances for another system coming into power very shortly. Brazil is purchasing American war machines. Some time ago, roughly a year ago, Brazil purchased already 12 times a digit in Soviet equipment. And because the new candidate, he wants to restore the relationship with Brazil and the United States, they are already making plans of buying military equipment. So then, the sore spots left by Snowden because of the spying done by the United States as far as Brazil is concerned. They're trying to cover it up with buying more military equipment. At this point in time, they should not be doing this because Brazil's GDP is very low. But the problem is, Brazil is indicating via this purchase they want to put this country also in a big, huge debt hole. Going back of what it was 20 years ago when Brazil was enslaved by IMF. That's what the rich people want. They want this country in debt. The United States is in total insolvency, yet they have the privilege of printing out more money because nations of the world are using the USD. So this government decided to get more arms from the United States. And we understand there is a war going on in the Middle East, Northern Africa. But the problem is, with this situation taking place, the U.S. has made the last push on the Middle East. This truly is the very last. After this situation is solved by the Soviets, then the U.S. won't ever again make another military push. And because of this time is the last time they're going to make this push to extend the 1,000 years of deceit. Asia obviously is adjusting itself because of this new push. Now comes the situation. Should Great Britain be involved very long in this war? Absolutely not. They should finish it as fast as they can and return home. The amount of debt that's going to come out of this war is tremendous. The candidate Romney, he was then a candidate in the last election of the United States. He was very close of receiving power at that time. As the United States is yet fasting themselves with money printing festival, yet the exchanges around the world, they are very reasonable because the United States is printing. When Romney turns himself into a great candidate, and if he wins, he's going to put a stop in this money printing festival. You can be sure of it. Then he wants to balance the budget, and then they're going to get their money from the exchanges around the world. That's the way it works. And then who is going to pay for these wars? This war is related on Daniel the 11th chapter. You can read very precisely the skirmishes of the kingdom of the south. The focus point of the kingdom of the south is related directly with the sons of Ishmael. Africa, also from the Christian viewpoint, is related with the violent ones. Then we find the land of Cush. So then, the other layer related with Daniel, because of the vision. Vision simply means tabernacling. Where do we read very precisely from the Hebraic structure of these prophecies? Where do we read the prophet speaking of tabernacling or establishing the vision? Yeshayahu chapter 1:8. As we read, Yeshayahu, when he wrote, was not in chronological order. Hebrew, understand, you don't read chronological. You have to understand by layers. There are times in the seasons you can mount these prophecies in a chronological way, But the existing copies of the translations of Yirmiyahu are not in chronological order. If you understand the prophecies, if you understand the writings, then you can place these in chronological order, roughly, if you know how to position these layers and where they belong. At this point in time, Yirmiyahu is not in chronological order. Because of referencing, let's understand in Yirmiyahu chapter 1:8. Then explains, woe to the land of Cush beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. It explains then the land of Cush and explains another understanding beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. Beyond the rivers of Ethiopia is not where Cush is at. Cush is on the north, roughly northern Sudan. Beyond the rivers of Ethiopia is Congo. But then explains tabernacling and the cities that laid waste for many centuries, speaking of the blowing of the shofar. This particular chapter pertains to Daniel when he explains and then establishing the vision. Now we understand where we are going with this. As we understand, there are Christians and they are somewhat active in the southern side of Africa. The northern part of Africa, it is the Arab nations. They have a strong control of the area and they do not admit Christianity. Another layer of the 11th chapter of Daniel pertains to this problem. Then there is a combination of reasons later on when the Soviet Union then marches down from north to south, putting an order in the entire situation. Then we understand what these violent ones are doing as far as establishing the vision. Then we read, for instance, then the northern kingdom shall come with a great army and much equipment. We understand the Soviet Union must become the top military power of this world, protecting the new Asiatic market, so the world can be linked up with it and being prosper. And in times those shall stand up against the kingdom of the south and the sons of the violent ones of your people, and shall lift up to establish the vision. Now, there is a gap of time of this section of the verse, and he, the northern kingdom, shall come with a great army and much equipment, explaining of the time of the combat of the end. Prior of this time, we understand when the Soviets, they come down to put an order in the entire land, reaching down beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, reaching Congo, and establishing trade with the Congolese people. Then we understand, because of these, in the midst of it, there is the establishment of the vision. Because the Arabs and the Ishmaelites, they won't understand tabernacling. Christians, they can't have in their way because what they believe is not true. Though they have a sense of a Savior, yet points directly to the instructions. And then the violent ones of Africa, they're going to understand there is a tabernacle that must be established. And they're going to push forward for the establishment of the vision. Because of these many layers working together with each other, then the Soviet Union comes down, and then at once, they are not going to be playing around. They're going to go there and put an order on the land. It states very clearly. You can read it by yourself. And And the king of the north shall raise a greater host than the former, and at the end of times shalt come with a great army and much equipment, and in those times those many shalt stand up against the kingdom of the south, and the sons of the valiant ones, your people, then shalt lift up to establish division. At this point in time, we understand there is a huge gap from verse 1:4 until the ships return. It explains then the United States then retrieving mostly from the world. They have to return to their land and rebuild. Their time is expired. This last push is the last. And they know it's coming. Prior of this time, then there is the linkage of China with these nations of Africa. However, Congo truly is a problem, because death and money is hand to hand over there, and is extremely disorganized. That's why the Soviet Union was chosen then to do the job. So what is the deal amongst the nations? We understand those people involved with this war against ISIL, they're going to have a huge priced tag they have to pay for later, and won't be cheap. And we understand the sons of Ishmael, they are going to maintain the low prices of oil for as long as they can. And the Arabs, they understand the second transition is in their hands. How does it play? Very simply. You have then the freighters of the earth. You find then in Galah, because certain of these layers of Daniel the 11th chapter dealing with the base of the statue where iron does not mix with the clay. You understand the kingdom of the east, north, and south playing together. Some sections of the layers are related with Galah, Revelation. The Arabs, they hold the oil in their hands. How they're going to play with this? Seriously, they're going to make deals with the freighters directly. How does it work? Certain freighters, they are positioned in certain countries. So then, as far as low price of oil, it doesn't take very much to understand then the Arabs are going to make deals directly with the freighters regarding fuel. That's where they get then the second transition. At the first, we are the starting points of the first transition, where the world was in 1,000 years of deceit. We are coming out of this deceit. US has done its last push to try to extend the junky 1,000 years of deceit. Never worked. And then the Ishmaelites, they are already ahead of time. They are already lowering the price of the crude. In order for the Ishmaelites to receive then the second transition, then they make deals directly with the freighters of the earth, so they can purchase fuel with a reasonable price, become independent. But it is a positive dependency, because then the freighters can get more freight and people can buy more and receive more for lower prices. That's the combination of China and the Arabs. During this time, few years ahead yet, then tabernacle must be set up. Why tabernacle must be set up? Do the nations truly must have a holy city? If they have whatsoever they want. They have, for instance, the system, they have money, they have boxes, they have parcels, they have fuel, they have freighters. But there is a problem. The world does not know how to manage riches. During the time when the Messiah was on the earth, he spent 12 months with his people. The scoundrelized scripture shows the Messiah only 40 days. 40 days was his time of fasting in the desert. It's found in Acts, how to rule the flesh so you can understand the spirit. It's got nothing to do with the Messiah spending 40 days with his people when he came from the dead. Does not make any sense. The Israelites or the Hebrews, they were away from maintaining the holy instructions per Moses' instructions for a long time. They did not perform those feasts properly. And in fact, they were using those feasts only to gather taxes from the people. So the Messiah then, he came back from the dead, he showed them, and he stayed with them for a year. And he went through every portion of those feasts, and then they did understand what they meant. And there was a time of prosperity on the land you can ever imagine. The land was extremely prosperous during this year the Messiah stayed on the land. As the world is experiencing once again, worldwide this time, a time of prosperity beyond imagination. The problem is people do not know how to handle it. Must have the establishment of this vision as per the instructions of Yirmiyahu the prophet, so nations can go there and receive directives. They are not going to receive orders. They're going to receive directives. If you want your nation to go this way for a long time and understand what this means, then you are directed to do this. Either you do it or you don't do it. Tabernacle is not going to force you to do what Tabernacle told you to do. But don't show up anymore next time. You get your word from heaven, you do what it says or don't return. And if you do return, you're going to receive the same understanding you had the last time. And if you return the next year, you're going to receive the same one you received the first time. 10 years from that time, you receive the same understanding you had the first time. Establishment of the vision is found, verse 1:5. Christianity in Northern Africa simply does not work. In Sudan, Southern Sudan is more Christian, Northern Sudan is more Arab. And the very transitional point of violent ones, where then the land turns to lushy, and the very point north where it turns to desert, and the very portion of these comes tabernacling. Violent ones on the south, that we understand, Africans, they don't take crap, yet they can't control tabernacling, they can't control the Hebraic language, neither they can control Christianity, neither they can control Islam. But they do understand if they are obedient to tabernacling, then they become prosperous. These understandings then, they go further, much further. It gets truly thicker. But then the fact is, why should we understand so far ahead if we don't understand the basics? At this point in time, the deal is the nations that can come out of this war with ISIL, they should do so. Now Mr. Putin and the Soviet Union must play very calmly, because there are yet a few years until the total establishment of the plans of the Northern Kingdom. Some roughly 36 months or so, a bit more, give another 5 months, 6 months, a half a year, up or down. And at this point in time, then the Soviet Union must link Cuba, and then Nicaragua, and then Venezuela, and then Congo, making plans for Congo after those 36, 40 months yet, make plans for Congo. And then US simply forget about it. US is going around in circles. They don't have any economy anymore. They are printing money like crazy. And China is going to get rid of the USD from their markets. So the only objective of US is thinking on retrieval. And how are they going to handle so many ships and airplanes and take care of the land and being a responsible nation once again. Furthermore, then when the situation with establishment of the vision is complete, when the city of the Messiah then returns, then the nations must receive directives. Those are not orders. Those are directives. Later on comes an exactor. 20th verse explains of an exactor. Next time we're going to understand, because in the very thick of situations. Have you ever heard from the British sailors? The fog was so heavy you could cut it with a knife. Please stay tuned. Much more coming up.